I was sitting in the waiting room at my local clinic when my phone buzzed. It was my daughter, Sarah. Her tone was so distant, almost businesslike, as she said, "Mom, we're heading to Italy tomorrow. I sold your Lakeside cottage and that old Chevy. We needed the funds. Take care." She ended the call abruptly. After 40 years of pouring my heart into raising her, she treated me like yesterday's news. But I exhaled slowly and felt a quiet smile form, because there was something my daughter had no idea about, the ace up my sleeve. Let me introduce myself properly, so you can picture who I am and where this all began. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a cozy suburb just outside Chicago, where the streets are lined with maple trees that turn fiery red in the fall, and neighbors still wave from their porches as you pass by. From the outside, I must seem like your typical old-fashioned Midwestern grandma, always in floral aprons, baking apple pies for the church bake sale or knitting colorful scarves to donate to the local shelter. I have that gentle smile, the kind that puts people at ease, and a soft voice that's perfect for telling bedtime stories or offering advice over a cup of tea. But oh, if only they knew, inside, I've always been the strategist, the quiet observer who plans 3 steps ahead, calculating the best way to navigate life's twists and turns without ever raising my voice or showing my hand too soon. It's a skill I honed over decades, managing our family through thick and thin, from financial tight spots to emotional storms, all while keeping that innocent demeanor intact. I'd lost my dear husband, Thomas, to a sudden stroke just 5 months earlier. We'd shared our breakfast rituals for over 4 decades, him carefully brewing my tea just the way I liked it, with a splash of milk and a hint of honey, then leaning in to kiss my cheek with his familiar morning darling. Those simple words, spoken with such tenderness, still echo in my mind every single day, a bittersweet reminder of the life we built together. Since Thomas's passing, Sarah had been coming around more often, or at least that's how it seemed at first. She'd drop by twice a week, helping with little things like running errands to the grocery store or sorting through paperwork, even insisting on scheduling this very checkup I was waiting for. "Mom, you have to take better care of yourself now that you're on your own," she'd say, with a smile that I once took for genuine daughterly love and concern. But now, in the harsh light of that phone call, I saw it for what it truly was, calculated convenience, a way to keep tabs on me while plotting her next move. The Lakeside cottage up in Michigan wasn't just some piece of property to me, it was the heart of our family's haven, a place we bought back when Sarah was just 12 years old, after years of scrimping and saving every penny from Thomas's factory overtime and my part-time sewing gigs at home. Those summers there were pure magic. Barbecues under the open sky with the smell of charcoal and fresh lake air mingling, fireworks bursting over the water on the 4th of July in a shower of reds, whites and blues, and Sarah growing up before our eyes, from building elaborate sandcastles on the shore to bringing her first boyfriends for awkward family dinners by the water's edge. I'd be the one hosting everyone, whipping up hearty meals like grilled corn on the cob slathered in butter, fresh salads from the little garden I tended with care, and homemade pies that filled the air with the scent of cinnamon and apples. I'd wash the linens, tidy up after the laughter-filled chaos, never once complaining because it was all part of our cherished traditions, the glue that held us together as a family. And then there was the Chevy, that beautiful '65 model that Thomas treated like his own child, polishing it meticulously every Sunday afternoon in the driveway, the sun glinting off its chrome as he worked, changing the oil with religious precision, and always parking it just so under the shade tree to protect its paint. That car held so many memories, road trips through the rolling Illinois countryside, the leather seats still faintly carrying the scent of Thomas's cologne, a comforting ghost of his presence that I clung to in my quiet moments of grief. When Sarah hung up so abruptly, leaving me there in that worn vinyl chair surrounded by the muffled coughs and whispers of other patients in the waiting room, no tears came to my eyes as they might have in the past. Instead, a wave of strategic calm washed over me, the kind I'd cultivated through years of quietly managing our household finances without ever making a fuss or drawing attention to my clever maneuvers. Because right in that very moment, as the clinic's clock ticked slowly on the wall, I recalled something I'd tucked away in the recesses of my mind amid the fog of grief. Just 4 days before Thomas passed, he'd handed me a sealed craft envelope with a knowing look in his eyes. "Evelyn, stash this away in your nightstand drawer," he'd said softly, his voice steady as always. "If anything ever happens to me, open it only when you're truly ready. It's my little way of looking out for you still." The overwhelming sorrow of those early days had buried it deep in my thoughts, But now, like a lifeline surfacing from the depths, it called to me with urgent clarity, promising answers and perhaps a path forward through this betrayal. The doctor finally called me in, and after a thorough examination, he cleared me with a reassuring nod. Healthy for my age, he said, just need to focus on eating a bit better, maybe add some fresh vegetables from the local market to my meals, and get out for more walks along the neighborhood paths to keep my joints limber and my heart strong. I nodded politely, thanking him with my usual gentle smile, but truthfully, my mind was miles away, racing ahead to that envelope waiting at home, to the chilling coldness in Sarah's voice that still echoed in my ears, and to how her husband Mark was likely the puppet master behind it all. He'd always seen me as nothing more than a burdensome old woman, resenting the family gatherings where I'd insist on traditions that brought us together. I stepped out of the clinic and made my way slowly to the bus stop, the autumn breeze carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves as I walked, realizing I no longer had my car according to Sarah's unilateral decision. But as I waited there on the bench, watching the traffic hum by and people hurry past with their own daily worries, I couldn't help but feel a small, secret smile tugging at my lips again. There was something almost poetic, almost fitting about this whole ordeal, like a plot twist in one of those old mystery novels I used to read by the fireside. Sarah had clearly thought she'd left me with absolutely nothing, stripped bare and vulnerable in my twilight years, but what she didn't know, and couldn't possibly have guessed, was that Thomas, my dear, thoughtful Thomas, had always been a man who planned ahead with meticulous care, anticipating storms before they even gathered on the horizon. The bus finally arrived with a hiss of brakes, and I boarded, finding a seat by the window where I could gaze out at the passing scenery. The neat rows of suburban houses with their manicured lawns, the corner stores with their familiar signs, and the endless stream of people rushing everywhere, each carrying their own hidden tragedies and unspoken secrets just like I was at that very moment. I had my own secrets too, buried in that envelope, and I was on the verge of uncovering them, ready to let them change the course of everything that had unfolded so far. Arriving home at last, I felt a quiet determination settle over me as I unlocked the front door, the familiar creak welcoming me back to the place Thomas and I had called our own for so many years. Without hesitation, I headed straight to my bedroom, the one we'd shared through laughter and tears, where the sunlight filtered softly through the lace curtains I'd sewn myself decades ago. The envelope was still there in the nightstand drawer, waiting patiently like an old friend, its surface slightly dusty from the months of neglect amid my grief. Thomas's steady handwriting stared back at me from the front. For Evelyn, my eternal planner, a title that now brought a mix of fondness and resolve to my heart. My fingers, steadied by a lifetime of careful work, from sewing quilts to balancing our books, trembled just slightly as I picked it up, feeling the weight of several documents shifting inside. I sat down on the edge of the bed we had shared for so long, the quilt with its patchwork patterns a testament to our life together, and took a deep, steadying breath, the kind that prepares you for whatever revelations lie ahead. It was starting to get dark outside, the twilight casting long shadows across the room that once might have frightened me in my loneliness but now felt like familiar companions in this unfolding drama. I opened the envelope slowly, methodically, as if I were unwrapping a precious birthday gift from Thomas himself, savoring each moment before the contents could change everything I thought I knew. What I found inside truly took my breath away, stopping my heart for a beat as the implications sank in. There were legal documents neatly organized, property deeds crisp and official, bank certificates with figures that seemed almost unreal, and right on top, a handwritten letter from Robert. Wait, no, from Thomas, my mind correcting itself in the emotion of the moment, his familiar handwriting bringing fresh tears to my eyes as I began to read. Dearest Evelyn, the letter began in his neat, deliberate script that I could almost hear in his voice. If you're reading this, it means I've left too soon, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. Forgive me for not sharing everything while I was alive, but I wanted to protect you from any unnecessary worries that might have clouded our happy days. Over the years, inspired by your own clever ways with our finances, I took our modest savings and invested them wisely in properties and businesses that grew beyond what we ever dreamed. We don't just have the Lakeside cottage to our name, we own 6 other properties in total, including the apartment building where Angela and Edward, Wait, Sarah and Mark, my thoughts blending stories in the excitement, make their home. We also hold shares in 3 solid companies that have grown to be worth more than you can imagine right now. You are rich, my love, not just in the ways that matter to us, our love, our memories, but on paper too, secure for whatever comes next. My hands trembled even more as I sifted through the accompanying documents, each one a revelation in itself. There were deeds to houses scattered in different city neighborhoods, each described with precise locations and values that made my head spin, a downtown condo that sounded like the kind of place young professionals dreamed of, a small motel along the coast that evoked images of ocean breezes and vacationers, and indeed, the 20-story apartment building, 15-unit condo complex in my version, where my daughter lived, a towering structure I'd visited many times without ever knowing Thomas was the silent owner for the past decade. He'd cleverly placed everything under the name of a company I hadn't known existed, and according to the papers laid out before me, I was now the sole heir and controller of that entity. There were also bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of, with balances featuring numbers that seemed almost surreal, far beyond what our simple life as a factory worker and homemaker should have yielded. Thomas had been a bus driver, factory worker, for 40 years, but apparently he'd also been a very smart investor in his spare time, turning every penny we saved, every small sacrifice we made, like skipping vacations or mending clothes instead of buying new, into a silent fortune that grew without my knowledge. In the letter, he explained his reasons with that gentle wisdom I loved. He had kept it all a secret because he didn't want me to worry about money matters that might distract from our joy, or for Sarah to know about our real financial situation and let it change her. You know, our daughter Evelyn, he wrote, if she knew we had so much, her attitude might shift in ways we wouldn't want. I always hoped she'd love us for who we are, not for what we have. What bitter irony that was. Our daughter had abandoned us thinking we had nothing left to give, when in reality, we had everything and more, a legacy built on quiet sacrifices and clever planning. That night, I couldn't find sleep no matter how I tried. I paced the house restlessly, my footsteps soft on the worn wooden floors, touching the old furniture that held so many memories. The armchair where Thomas used to read the newspaper with his glasses perched on his nose, the knickknacks on the shelves that Sarah had always criticized for being outdated and dusty, relics from a simpler time she deemed unworthy. I paused at the family photos hanging on the wall, my fingers tracing the frames, especially the one where she was just 5 years old, sitting on Thomas's lap with that infectious laugh frozen in time, her eyes sparkling with pure joy. Where had that sweet little girl gone? When exactly had she become so cold, so calculating, prioritizing quick cash over the bonds that had defined our family? The next day dawned early, the sunlight filtering through the curtains in golden shafts, and the phone rang again, pulling me from my reverie. It was Sarah once more, her voice sounding different this time, softer and more contrived, but I'd already learned to be wary of those sudden shifts in tone, like a weather vane changing with the wind. "Mom, how are you feeling today?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to tell her about the envelope, about the discoveries that had appended everything, but I held back, my strategic mind advising patience. "I'm managing, dear," I replied calmly. She continued, "I just wanted to let you know we already transferred the money from the house and the car sales. We deposited your share into your account. It's not a lot, but it'll help you live comfortably for a few months while you look for something smaller to suit your needs." My share? I thought, keeping my voice even and innocent. "Yes, Mom," she went on. "We obviously weren't going to leave you with absolutely nothing. We gave you 25%. That's fair, isn't it? We really need the rest for our investment in Italy. Mark has this incredible business opportunity lined up over there, something that could change everything for us. 25% of my own cherished belongings. How generous indeed," I mused inwardly with a touch of sarcasm I didn't let show. "I see, honey," I said aloud, my tone steady. "And when do you leave for this adventure?" "This afternoon, actually," she replied, her excitement bubbling through. "Our bags are already packed, ready to go. We'll be gone for at least 6 months, maybe more if the business takes off as planned. But don't worry, Mom, when we get back, we'll help you find a small apartment, something simple that fits your needs perfectly." Fits my needs, as if she had any real idea what those were after all these years. "Okay, Sarah, have a safe trip and enjoy yourselves," I said, keeping the conversation light. "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand," she gushed. "You've always been so compassionate and supportive. We love you so much." And just like that, she hung up again. I stood there in the kitchen, the phone still in my hand, the morning light casting long shadows across the floor, and for the first time in months since Thomas's death, I laughed, a genuine hearty laugh that echoed through the empty house. The situation was so utterly absurd, so comically twisted, that it bordered on the surreal. My own daughter had essentially robbed me, kicking me out of parts of my life with casual indifference, speaking to me with that unbearable condescension as if I were a child, all to fund a European adventure that I suspected would end in disaster given Mark's track record. But what bothered me most deeply wasn't the money itself. It was the ease with which she had discarded me, like an old garment no longer fashionable. 40 years of my life dedicated to her. Sleepless nights when she was ill, encouragement through her school struggles, unconditional love through her teenage rebellions. And she had erased it all with a 2-minute phone call that treated me as an afterthought. That was the wound that truly stung, cutting deeper than any financial loss ever could. I decided to check my bank account online, logging in with the password Thomas and I had set together years ago, and sure enough, there was the deposit. An amount that probably seemed generous in their eyes but to me was nothing short of a mockery, a pittance from sales that had undervalued both the cottage and the Chevy because they'd rushed for quick cash to fuel their dreams. That afternoon, from my kitchen window with its view of the quiet street, I watched Sarah and Mark load their suitcases into a waiting cab. He was hauling 2 enormous bags, straining under their weight, while she carried a very expensive-looking carry-on, the kind with designer labels that screamed luxury. I saw them laugh together, share a quick kiss, and gesture animatedly as they made their final plans, looking for all the world like 2 carefree teenagers embarking on a grand adventure without a worry in the world. They never once looked toward my window, never waved goodbye or even acknowledged the house that had been the backdrop to so much of their lives. When the cab finally drove away, kicking up a bit of dust from the road, I sat down at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea steaming in my hands and Thomas's documents spread out before me like a map to a new future. I had some serious decisions to make now. I could call a lawyer immediately, demand the return of my properties, and reclaim everything they'd taken from me through legal force. But something deeper inside me, that strategic voice I trusted all my life, whispered there was a better way, a more educational approach that would teach lasting lessons rather than just exact punishment. I reached out to Ms. Harlow again, the lawyer who had handled Thomas's affairs with such professionalism, remembering how she'd been at the funeral, offering sincere condolences and telling me to call if I ever needed anything. Well, now I did need her expertise more than ever. "Mrs. Carter, it's good to hear from you," she said when she answered. "How are you holding up?" "I'm doing well, Miss Harlow," I replied, my voice steady. "But I need to see you urgently. I found some documents from Thomas that I don't quite understand, and I think they change everything." "Of course," she said without hesitation. "You can come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll clear my schedule for you." That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity since Thomas's passing, I slept soundly through the hours, my mind at peace with the plan taking shape. I dreamed of Thomas sitting in his favorite armchair, reading the morning newspaper just as he had every day, the pages rustling softly. And when he looked up and saw me standing there, he smiled that warm, knowing smile of his and said, "It's about time, my love. It's about time you stood up for yourself with that clever mind of yours." I woke up with a strange new feeling stirring inside me. It wasn't exactly happiness, not yet, but it wasn't the crushing sadness that had weighed on me for so many months either. It was something more like determination, a clear purpose guiding my steps forward. For the first time since Thomas's death, I had a focused goal, a path to reclaim what was mine, but not in the confrontational way Sarah might have expected or feared. The next morning, I dressed with more care than usual, choosing my favorite wine-colored dress, the one Thomas always said made me look so elegant and poised, bringing out the sparkle in my eyes. I fixed my hair neatly, applied a touch of makeup to brighten my features, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't recognized in a long time. A strong, capable woman ready to take control. Miss Harlow's office was downtown, in an old but elegant building with polished marble floors that echoed my footsteps and large windows overlooking the bustling city streets below. She greeted me with a warm smile and a firm handshake, but when I showed her the documents from the envelope, her expression shifted from polite concern to complete astonishment. "Mrs. Carter, this is much more than I ever imagined," she said, her voice filled with genuine surprise as she leafed through the papers. "Thomas was a very smart man indeed. Look," she continued, pointing to specific sections, "according to these, you are the owner of all this." "I know, Miss Harlow," I interrupted gently. "I've already reviewed them carefully at home. What I need to know now is what I can do legally with this information." Miss Harlow explained that everything was in perfect order, the documents legitimate and binding, confirming that I was the rightful owner of all those properties and assets. She also verified something I'd already suspected from my own reading. The sale of the Lakeside cottage was completely illegal because Sarah had no legal right to sell it without my explicit consent. "We can get the house back immediately, Mrs. Carter," she said confidently, "and we could even proceed with legal action against your daughter for fraud if that's the route you want to take." "No, Miss Harlow," I replied firmly, my strategic mind already several steps ahead. "I don't want to pursue any legal action against her, at least not yet. I want to handle this another way entirely. I want everything to remain a secret for now, at least until the timing is right. Can you help me with that?" She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and respect, nodding slowly. "Of course, you are my client, and I'll follow your instructions. What exactly do you need me to do?" "I need you to discreetly get the Lakeside cottage back," I explained. "Do whatever is necessary to nullify that fraudulent sale without raising alarms, and I need your assistance to gain real, direct control over all my properties, especially the condo complex where my daughter lives." "I understand completely," she said, jotting notes on her pad. "It will be a process that takes a few weeks to complete all the paperwork and transfers, but it's entirely feasible without drawing attention." "Perfect," I responded, feeling a surge of empowerment. "And Miss Harlow, it's crucial that no one knows I am behind all of this, at least for the time being." When I left her office that day, stepping out into the busy downtown streets filled with the sounds of honking cars and chatting pedestrians, I felt as if I'd awakened from a very long, hazy dream. The buildings towered above, the air carried the scent of street vendors selling hot dogs and pretzels, and life pulsed on as normal around me. But for me, everything had irrevocably changed. I had a clear plan now, one that would unfold with precision. The following weeks turned out to be the strangest and most transformative of my entire life. Officially, to the outside world, I was still the poor, abandoned widow, going about my days with that air of quiet vulnerability. But in secret, behind closed doors, I was a wealthy woman, silently orchestrating the recovery of my assets with the patience of a master strategist. Miss Harlow worked with remarkable efficiency, calling me every few days with updates on the progress of the legal proceedings, each conversation building my confidence. I decided to stay in my familiar house for the time being. It was mine after all, though Sarah probably expected me to downsize to a single room in some assisted living facility. Every morning, I'd wake up early, have my breakfast at the same kitchen table where Thomas and I had shared countless meals and conversations over the years, then step out for a leisurely walk around the neighborhood, greeting familiar faces along the way. The neighbors would wave or stop to chat, offering that mix of pity and curiosity they reserved for recent widows like me, their voices laced with concern. One afternoon, while I was out front watering the plants in my garden, the roses Thomas had planted for our anniversary blooming vibrantly despite everything, Aurora, my lifelong neighbor from next door, came over with her usual basket of fresh baked goods. "Evelyn dear," she said, her eyes full of sympathy, "is it true that Sarah went off to Europe and left you all alone like this?" "Yes, Aurora," I replied with a soft smile, "she went with Mark. They have some business plans over there that they're excited about." "And how are you going to manage, sweetie?" she pressed gently. "We all know Thomas didn't leave much behind in the way of money." If only you knew the truth, I thought to myself, but aloud I said, "Don't worry about me, Aurora, I'll be just fine." "Do you need anything at all?" she offered. "I can bring over some meals, help with the groceries, whatever you need." "You're very kind," I assured her, "but I'm managing, really." Aurora looked at me with that familiar expression, compassion mixed with a touch of relief that it wasn't her own tragedy unfolding, and said, "Well, you know where to find me if things get tough." These kinds of conversations repeated themselves constantly in those weeks. The butcher at the market asking after my health with a sympathetic tilt of his head, the baker slipping an extra loaf into my bag, just because, the lady at the corner store chatting about the weather before steering toward my situation with careful words. Everyone spoke to me in that softened tone reserved for the unfortunate, and I'd nod graciously, smile my innocent smile, and thank them for their kind concern. But deep inside, a part of me actually enjoyed this little performance, this double life I was leading. It was like being the lead in my own secret play, where I held all the scripts and directed the scenes from behind the curtain. Miss Harlow called me one Wednesday morning with some particularly good news that advanced my plan further. "Mrs. Carter, I have excellent updates for you, she said. I've successfully nullified the sale of the Lakeside cottage. The buyers were innocent parties and got their money back without any issues or complications. The house is officially yours again, free and clear. That's wonderful, Miss Harlow, I replied, my heart lifting. And what about the condo building where Sarah lives? That one's a bit more complicated administratively, she explained, but technically, you've always been the owner through the company structure. We just need to finalize some changes so you have direct, hands-on control. That should take another 2 weeks at most. Perfect, keep me informed as things progress, I said before hanging up. After that call, I sat in the kitchen with my morning coffee, the steam rising in gentle curls, and thought deeply about Sarah. She'd been in Europe for 3 weeks now, and I hadn't heard a single word from her. Not a phone call, not a message, not even a simple postcard to check in. To her, I had ceased to exist the second she got the money she needed, but I knew with certainty that was all about to change very soon. I decided then to visit the Lakeside cottage myself, taking the bus up to the coast along the same familiar route Thomas and I had traveled hundreds of times over the years, the scenery flashing by like old memories. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Small and charming, painted in that soft cream color with a porch overlooking the sparkling ocean waves. The new owners had added some potted plants on the steps, bright flowers nodding in the breeze, but other than that, everything remained the same, a time capsule of our family's happiest days. I sat on the curb across the street and just looked at it for a full hour, letting the memories wash over me like the tide. Summer afternoons when Sarah was little, running barefoot on the beach and building towering sandcastles that inevitably crumbled, Thomas grilling fresh fish on the barbecue while I prepared salads in the kitchen, the laughter echoing as Sarah brought friends, then boyfriends, and finally Mark to our gatherings. All those joyful moments that she had so callously reduced to a mere commercial transaction for quick cash. An older gentleman emerged from the house eventually and noticed me sitting there, approaching with a concerned look. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "Yes, thank you," I replied. "I'm just remembering old times. I knew the former owners quite well." "What a shame about what happened," he said, shaking his head. "They told us the elderly lady was very sick and needed to sell fast. We thought it was a great deal, but it turns out the sale wasn't legal at all. We had to give the house back." "Did you know them personally?" I inquired casually. "No, everything was done through intermediaries," he explained, "but they mentioned the daughter was handling it all because the mother couldn't manage. What a sad situation." If you only knew how sad it really was, I thought to myself, but aloud I said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't lose your money in the end." "Yes, luckily everything worked out," he agreed. "Although now we have to start looking for another house. We really liked this one." I left there with a heavy heart that afternoon, the bus ride back giving me time to reflect. It wasn't just the money that hurt so deeply, it was the ease with which Sarah had lied about me, fabricating a story about my supposed illness and vulnerability to justify her actions. To her, I wasn't a person with real feelings and a lifetime of love given freely. I was merely an obstacle to be removed, a hurdle in the way of her ambitions. Did this touch you? Share your city and thoughts below. Support with super thanks for more tales. Check recommended stories on screen. Subscribe.